So welcome everyone to Pause and Pivot. My name is Margarita V, the host of our Cafecito Chat, and this is a space where we explore the science and soul of meaningful living through books, reflection, conversations, and conscious community. And this month, we've been exploring the theme around mental health matters and mental fitness sustains it. So throughout this month, we've really been asking what helps human beings stay grounded, emotionally resilient, focused, and fully human in the modern world. We began with The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt, where we explored the growing crises of fragmented attention, rising anxiety, social media overwhelm, and what happens when technology begins shaping the emotional lives of young people and adults. One of the biggest takeaway from this was the importance of protecting attention and learning how to reclaim the presence in a distracted world. Then we moved into Brain Energy by Christopher Palmer, which expanded the conversation into metabolism, nervous system regulation, inflammation, sleep, and all the other wellness pillars, along with the biological foundations of mental health. The discussion really reminded us that mental well-being is deeply connected to how we nourish, regulate, and care for ourselves as whole human beings. And his big share was that all metabolic disorders are metabolic disorders of the mind, or all mental disorders are metabolic disorders of the mind. So it's a really new idea to dive into. And then last week, we explored Positive Intelligence by Shirzad Chamine, where we focused on mental fitness, awareness training, and how stress patterns and reactive thinking quickly shape our daily lives and leadership. And today, my friends, we are diving into a favorite book of mine, and I know of Colin's, and this is Conquest of Mind by Eknath Easwaran. And honestly, this book feels like the spiritual capstone to everything we're exploring this month. Because underneath the stress, the distraction, the overwhelm, the anxiety, the reactivity to modern life, and our fragmented attention, this book asks a deeper question. Who or what is directing the mind? So Eswaran's answer to that is the importance of conscious attention, disciplined awareness, having a daily practice, developing compassion for self and others, and developing sort of a attitude or orientation for intentional living. So that's what we'll get into in just a moment, and we'll be introducing our guests shortly. And if these conversations resonate with you, we'd love for you to like and subscribe and share these Cafecito Chats with other people who may enjoy thoughtful conversations around well-being, flourishing, leadership, mental fitness, and meaningful living in the modern world. Before we dive into today's discussion, I'd love to hear from our guest today. As we wrap up this month's focus on mental health and mental fitness, what's one idea or insight or maybe even a shift that has stayed with you from these conversations, from this month's focus on mental fitness? Or share something you're especially excited to explore in today's conversation around Conquest of Mind. So let's go ahead and meet our co-hosts today. Hey, Colin. Hey, Gordon. How are you?
Well, as you know, I'll go ahead and tell you that this man changed my life. I was in a profoundly chaotic and just a broken time of my life when I was led to his book. At the time, it was simply called Meditation, but they've subsequently retitled it as Passage Meditation, and it changed my life. I really can't even begin to express how much and how powerfully I feel about this human.
Thank you, Colin. I'm with you.
Well, Colin, I'm very and Maggie, I'm very excited to have this conversation. I've been moved very deeply in the last couple of years by working with Maharshi on transcendental meditation, which has a somewhat different perspective, but not, I mean, but similar in many ways. So I'm very interested in this conversation to better understand this particular perspective and how it might relate to that work as well. So.
Absolutely. Thank you for being here and joining us today, Gordon and Colin. And that's the beauty of these conversations. It's not to necessarily agree on every idea, but it's to look at the gems from the different perspectives that we can each bring. So this book, very brief, less than 200 pages, took me about 5.5 hours. So it's a pretty quick read, but not, because I underlined every single page. So let's go ahead and get right in. We'll go ahead and begin a brief share of an overview of the book, an overview of the author, and why this conversation feels so timely right now. So let's jump right in. So today we're exploring Conquest of Mind by Eknath Easwaran. Take charge of your thoughts and reshape your life through meditation. And what I appreciate so much about this book is that Easwaran really presents meditation not like an escape from life. We're going to the cave or going away to a meditation retreat, but basically he shares it with us as a training for everyday life. Mm-hmm. Ways to train our attention, ways to train our awareness, ways to train in our patience, ways to get into and connect with emotional freedom. And honestly, in today's world, those may become some of the most important human capacities we can intentionally cultivate. So this month, the learning arc that we've been looking at is looking at mental health matters, and that mental fitness is the way to sustain it. So whatever we're doing with our body, brushing our teeth or eating healthy, mental fitness can be part of that mental hygiene approach to whole person well-being and flourishing. And so from his perspective, from the perspective for the whole month, we've looked at different audiences and different authors, including the anxious generation. We've looked at brain energy. We've looked at positive intelligence. So each of these books are looking at mental health and well-being and its connection to other aspects of how we can show up and flourish. And it's fascinating how coherent these conversations have become, because all 4 books are really circling around one central idea. And that is, how do we consciously direct our lives rather than live reactively? So let's dive into a book overview. So Conquest of Mind, Training the Mind for Everyday Life. One of the core ideas in this book is that attention itself can be trained. Easwaran suggests that much of human suffering comes from an untrained mind, from an unreactive or an untrained mind, meaning like a reactive mind, one that constantly is pulled by distraction, emotional impulses, established habits, or maybe fears, worries, and other external stimulation. So meditation through this book, he begins to show, can become a way of strengthening our ability to simply pause, observe, and then redirect our attention so that we're more able to respond consciously. And what I really appreciate is that he frames this as practical daily life training, not just abstract spirituality, but how we can use it and utilize it. And one of the things I really love about this author is that he's so funny. So let's dive into the author, Eknath Easwaran. And I hope I'm pronouncing that name right, correctly. He was an Indian-born spiritual teacher, author, and translator who founded the Blue Mountain Center of Meditation in California. He became widely known for helping bridge Eastern contemplative wisdom with Western daily life. And what makes his work especially accessible is that he focused less on philosophy alone and really relying on how can we apply this? How can we bring these disciplines into daily practice as a form of daily rituals and discipline, focusing on how important it is to focus on application to relationships and the importance of connection and compassion with others. Overall, his message is that meditation can change the way we actually live. Off the yoga mat or off the meditation mat, right? So he's written many other books. To learn more about him, you can click on one of these links for Blue Mountain Center of Meditation, or for a lot more information to dive into the opus of work of Eknath Easwaran, you can check out the Wikipedia page. So why this book matters. We always kind of try and make it relevant. Why this book? Why now? And so this conversation feels really relevant today in support of the other books that we've looked at this month, because as we've noticed, modern life is constantly pulling our attention outward. And many people are living in a state of chronic distraction, emotional reactivity, overstimulation, fragmented focus, and in general, nervous system overload. So the technology, the beautiful technology we have around us, can compete for our attention. So what may now be one of the most important human skills we can intentionally protect and cultivate can come from this ability to have our attention in the here and now. So one of the deeper questions underneath this book is, if we do not consciously train attention, what will train it for us? So, as usual, we want to share the whole book with you, but we don't always have time to go through the whole book. So we like to highlight just some big ideas, some overall ideas to highlight and lead our discussions today. So we're going to look at some themes from Conquest of Mind. Basically, number one, we'll look at attention is the training ground of freedom, how awareness protects conscious choice. And then we'll go into idea two, daily life is the practice, how our small repeated actions reshape the mind over time. And number three, the era of the heart. I can't wait to get that one. Basically looking at how conscious living expands compassion, connection, and flourishing. And honestly, these ideas build beautifully on one another and from previous conversations. So as we come back to our guest today, would love to reflect your ideas and your shares in general. You know, this book was written decades ago, but it feels incredibly relevant to modern life. So why do you think conversations around meditation and awareness and even emotional regulation feel especially important right now? Let's turn to you. What's coming up for you?
Well, one of the things that stands out for me is this, I mean, basically the things that he's listed here and that you've talked about, this set of distractors, this set of stressors. I know I came from a culture that was totally about you never rest, just keep go, go, go. In fact, if you were taking time to rest, it was you were a wimp. Somehow you weren't really going for it. And so, in fact, life balance was considered a bad word. We didn't want to talk about it. And since I've started doing meditation the last 3 years and really made it part of my life, it's completely shifted my entire emotional way of being, and how profoundly inaccurate that previous view was, and how much needed is this place where I can check in and be with this quiet, still place from which I can kind of recalibrate and recenter for whatever I'm going to be doing in my life. And it just, to me, it's indispensable at this point. So I'm really excited by the ideas here that he's talking about.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Gordon. And that's what we'd love to do in this conversation, is to recognize and be aware of how our own cultural understandings or our previous belief sets have been impacting how we're relating to ourselves and then to those around us. So each of these books, each of these conversations allow us to kind of look at them through our own lens, and we get the gift of this conversation to be able to see it from different perspectives. So thanks so much for that reflection, Gordon. And Colin, I know this author means so much to you. I'd love to hear your initial ideas on how.
Well, all I'll say is that for somebody who is in emotional distress, which I was, 1994, summer of 1994, I just been told 6 months before that both of my sons were cognitively disabled through a genetic defect. I was a Mormon CPA with Ernst and Young, and living the life Gordon talked about. Just, hard charging, gonna conquer the world, all that stuff. And all of a sudden, I had been given a diagnosis for my boys that once I started to imagine outward, my life wasn't going to be what I thought it was. And I really didn't want to. It was the first time in my life I did not want to be alive on this earth. And all I will say is that Eknath Easwaran altered me profoundly. And it was him and his book, Passage Meditation, that rocked my reality such that within a couple of years, I was. You have to be careful with his wisdom, because if you're a little crazy like me, I ran with it hard, and it just altered reality profoundly. But the thing is, I will tell you, is that I found peace through. I know it's not him, and I know it's not through his words, but his guidance is what gave me a path to what I call powerful peace. And I've always been and always will be grateful for him.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Colin, for that beautiful reflection on how meaningful and relevant this book is to you personally. And that's part of the reason why we're together, through our love of books, through the acknowledgement of the powerful impact that these books can have on our lives. One book can change a life. And we just heard from Colin the direct experience of reading the words of someone who went through their own life, gathered their own wisdom, put it together in a way that they were able to bless and share with the rest of the world. And as we've been talking since the beginning of these Cafecito Chats, when we came across the statistic shared in a study that in 2025, about 40% of adults in America reported that they had not read even one book in the whole year. And so we started to talk about that and then we realized through positive psychology research, the benefits, the multiple benefits that would come if we spend just 6 minutes a day reading a book, that this can help to alleviate some of the experiences of anxiety and low levels of depression and feeling of aloneness. And so those two stats have always stayed with us, practice guidelines, is that we want to encourage more people to read books. Because as Colin just shared, they have the power to possibly change a life or just pivot our day-to-day ways in which we're showing up. So let's begin with the big idea around attention is the training ground of freedom. So he looks at meditation strengthens conscious awareness, and that attention shapes our experience. So where attention goes is really where almost everything goes, right? Our emotions, our energy, our repeat thought patterns, and then our behaviors that often follow. So Easwaran suggests that meditation strengthens our ability to become aware of automatic reactions, what we habitually do and may not be consciously aware, and how we can be maybe unconsciously be controlled by them, almost like the invisible strings of a puppet master, what's really pulling our strings. And this feels especially important in the modern world because of all the beautiful technology we are now blessed to have in our homes and in our workplaces, but that also have these algorithms, right? And all the different multi-discipline ways in which media reaches out to us, all the notifications we get, the dings and the pings and the notifications, all the advertising, the push notifications. And if you can just feel that nervous system stress kind of kicking in. And then the little whipped cream on top is our tendency to maybe multitask. So how we are constantly competing for attention. So in many ways, training attention becomes an act of freedom. Freedom from what the author is sharing, freedom from compulsive action or reaction, freedom from distraction, and freedom from living unconsciously. So when we can have our training for our attention this can overall give us what we call the human agency, our confidence and ability to actually direct our focus energies towards what we choose to put our focus on, and then to confidently begin to move in that direction. So, in a distracted world, conscious attention becomes an act of freedom, our own personal exercise of freedom. So, a quote to share from Eknath is that meditation is a warm-up exercise for the mind so that you can jog through the rest of the day without getting agitated or spraining your patience. See, I love how funny he is. He's always looking around for real life occurrences. And I'll tell you a story in just a minute, but I love how practical this quote is, and how it feels. That meditation isn't presented as something perfect to do on a beautiful cushion with perfect presence of mind and no distraction. No, he says, bring it into the workplace, bring it where you are. It's presented as training, simple everyday training for everyday life. So one thing this book highlights is how easy it is for modern life, right, to fragment attention and pull us into reactivity. So curious, where do you think people most struggle today when it comes to protecting attention or the ability to stay present? What's coming up for you guys?
Well, I can tell you that when I found his book, I mean, if you put it in context, I was a really left brain I still am hyper rational accountant. Everything, I love little boxes. Everything needs to fit in little boxes. And I can still remember the first time I read, he made a statement. He says, you're not thinking with your mind is thinking through you. And I was like, I can control my mind. And then he started introducing some concepts, and I tried to use his methodology, and within 10 seconds, I was like, oh my God, he's right. I have absolutely no capacity to focus my attention. And that it was that moment. But if you think about where I came from, here's this Eastern Indian. He was a Fulbright scholar. He had found a way to communicate these principles to American minds. I mean, he taught at Berkeley in the 60s and was accepted there, and his classes were full of people trying to learn his principles. But it was that moment that I realized the way he speaks, it spoke to me, and I could understand it, and I wanted to understand more.
Mm-hmm. Yep. I love that. And
Thank you, Colin.
yeah, go ahead, Gordon.
I love that also. I love the way that you're expressing it, and his ability to put it in terms that somehow we Westerners could sort of understand how to apply it. And my question, and given that you've done a lot of meditation, I take it using his methodology, Colin, is that correct? So I've been following a practice which is very similar in the ways that he's describing it, transcendental meditation, which is about a way of disciplining the mind, letting go of all those attachments to all those ideas. It has the same sort of thing of calming yourself, but it seems to be a bit different. In this case, with Maharishi, it's about connecting to a quiet sense of being in a kind of effortless way, rather than an effort at attending or exercising attention, which sounds like it's what's emphasized in his practice. And I'm curious how those two might be related, Colin, if you could speak to that a little bit.
Well, without hijacking the conversation, because Gordon and I could spend a lot of time with you. If you can believe this, strangely enough, I was initiated into TM at the age of 13.
Oh my gosh.
And I practiced it only not as a spiritual practice, but because the initiator said that you could cram about the equivalent of 2 hours of REM sleep into 30 minutes of deep TM meditation. The main difference is the practicality. The TM principles are real and valid, but from the perspective of a Western mind, a lot of the terminology, a lot of the logic, the little green book from TM it was a bit different. Eknath is like talking to a really cool uncle who's like chill and cool and funny, and TM is like talking to a Maharishi. And
Um,
that's my take. So we
thank
won't go into it further, but I would love to spend some time with you, brother.
That is very interesting. Thank you so much. And it really inspires me to want to read more deeply into his work. So thank you for that. Appreciate it.
So he does outline in chapter 15 an 8-point program where he goes through kind of his core practices. And mind you, he's been doing it for 50 years or longer. And his method is unique, and that's a really great point. While this book isn't training you or teaching you how to meditate, it's really talking about the impacts of the mind when we do or we don't meditate, and how to bring it into, encouraging us to bring the discipline and practice into everyday life. So for each person, we have a unique constitution, based on Ayurveda and yoga philosophy. Each individual has their own mind body sort of constitution. And so whether you want to look for a practice that honors your specific dosha, and or keeping in mind the stage in life you're in, the purpose for the meditation. There's so many different styles of meditation. Some, like transcendental meditation, are very calming, very internally focused, and focus on, trying to calm the mind and focus on a mantra or some small sequencing of guided thoughts. His view is to find a spiritual text that really moves you, and then memorize it. And then you focus on that, so that you basically just sit and you're working through just the memory of it. And so through the repetition of it is when we start to then train the mind to focus on it, and eventually narrow the mind until the mind gives up trying to distract itself. And so it's a very different type of meditation. I haven't tried it, but for those that love prose and poetry or inspirational, for bhakti yogis, people who are really devoted to devotion and singing and chanting, this might be a wonderful way to really connect with the length of words and the meaning and connection you feel. So if you can feel, that's very much devotionally practice. And then there's other that are very more active forms of meditation, like Kundalini forms of meditation, which include very active breathing postures and even movement of arms, that can be really good for people that are more like Pitta, that have more of the flame and fire, that need more of that, activity first before the rest and the stillness. And so the big idea with which practice to select, number one is just start. Pick a time, pick a place, and just start with sitting calmly for 1 minute and focus on the breath. And then as you begin to explore different teachers, different formats, once you find that one works for you, that you start to feel a connection of, you can soften and deepen, and there's that connection. There's some sort of personal connection with a teacher or a lineage or a methodology that you feel really resonates with who you are and how you like to show up. Then stick with it. So the most important part is to find, explore in the beginning, try out different styles, journal about them, see which ones really allow you to just drop in and kind of forget where you're at. And once you find that, begin to deepen it. He says, follow your teacher. So follow, so maybe this is a new teacher, and then just read all their books, get to know them inside out, and follow that path. Not because it's the one right way, but it's what works for you. And so the idea here is that all paths of meditation practice lead to the same inner experience. And so whichever path we take, Rumi, I think, once said, out there in the field, between right and wrong is a field. I'll meet you there. So it's just like, in meditation, we let go of the idea of time and space and what differentiates me from you. It's where this space is, this collective space where we all show up in the same oneness. And so the path to get there shouldn't matter. It's what works for you to be the portal to allow you to enter into this space of mindfulness. And so he doesn't really go into, the method of it. It's more important to understand why would you want to do it. And once you can understand the why and the benefits and the importance of training the mind for today's society, then the next step is, which style should I try? And we always love to do an open mind, growth mindset, right? Just be curious, explore, and find one that works. And being open to realize at different stages in life, we might change, we might alter them. So that was a lot to share. Any other comments on that?
I just want to thank you, Maggie, for that perspective. I thought that was beautifully said. And the idea that these are all paths, because they're all about, what was it Patanjali first said? It's just quieting the perturbations of the mind. They're all just different ways to do it. But that's really what it's about. So thank you for that, because it's like the idea that it's about helping us show up in this space together in a new way to be able to connect and explore.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, frankly, this was one of the hard things for me because I went through in just a really short amount of time, I had a really, really profound experience. And because it was new to me, I didn't understand that it was a combination of timing for me. You could call it karmic timing. I was ready for the message. And the depth of the experience was so profound that all I did was thought that this book will change your life. Over my life during those first 5 years, I must have given away 100 copies of his book, Meditation. There were times where my wife would say, some friends would invite us out to dinner, and she'd say, I won't go unless you promise not to talk about meditation. I was a man obsessed because it altered my reality so profoundly, So to your point, eventually I came to realize, yes, different people need different methods, but I'll tell you what, this methodology that he teaches it's pretty general, and most people can use it effectively.
Awesome. Thank you for that. Well, let's move on to idea number 2 as we move into daily life is the practice. The idea is that transformation happens through repeated action. So that past quote was talking about meditation as a warm-up. And one of the funny things he talks about is that he saw people exercising along by the San Francisco Bridge. And they were doing these funny movements around these metal pieces of equipment around the grass. And he couldn't understand why people were stopping to do these things. They were push-ups and sit-ups and stuff, but he'd never seen people do this before, right? So it dawned on him that, people do these warm-up exercises before they go and run. So it's that type of a real life example where Easwaran will pull in and say, well, meditation is the same for our mental capabilities. We need to warm it up for the day. So before you hit the ground running and you go to work or you deal with our families, right? It's like, let's do some warm up in the brain first before we sprain our brain. So I just thought that was really funny. As we look at daily life, how can we look at daily life as little pieces of warm up, refreshing throughout the day, how the small habits can really help us to reshape and reframe the mind throughout the day, focusing very much on the impact of relationships, those that surround us throughout the day, through the workplace where we spend most of our time, because relationships become those opportunities to be our master or to practice our craft, right? And that it's the consistency and the small practices that we keep talking about in all the different books. It's not the big, perfect action that we're doing, but it's to honor, bring the humility and the humbleness of the respecting the small, consistent actions that we can take over time that work to strengthen our inner discipline, our inner mental muscles. Easwaran repeatedly reminds us that transformation happens through these small, repeated actions, not isolated moments of high inspired thought, that it's really daily life itself becomes the practice field. So honestly, this connects beautifully to everything we've been discussing around the habits and the nervous system, what we talked about, the PQ reps, and our ability to emotionally regulate on the go so that we kind of come closer to this concept of conscious living, being more plugged in throughout the day. And one insight I kept reflecting on while reading this book was that, every difficulty can become an exercise station for growth. Isn't that great? Every difficulty. So just like one of those exercise stations on the grass by the San Francisco Bridge, every difficulty in our day can become an exercise station for growth. I just love that. Okay, so quote here. He says that nothing you can do will strengthen your determination more than the regular practice of meditation. And this quote really challenges modern culture's obsession with the instant transformation, instant gratification. It's really just that small, repeated practice. As we then deepen into our ability to harness our attention and put our focus where we would like to direct it. So this book emphasizes that small, repeated practices gradually can reshape the mind and over time rebuild that nervous system. So curious, what daily practice or habits help you personally return to that sense of groundedness or clarity or that feeling of showing up with intentionality in our day-to-day life?
Well, I'll tell you that in my experience, because you mentioned his methodology, he suggested in his book Passage Meditation or Meditation, he suggested if you don't have something, he recommended, like you said, scripture or poetry. He recommended the prayer of St. Francis. Now, I was a Mormon, and the idea of memorizing a Catholic prayer was weird, but I did it. And he gave a couple of images that really resonated with me. One, he talked about two pitchers, one full of oil, and letting your thoughts flow in such a way that you imagine the oil flowing out of one pitcher to another, that your thoughts were smooth like that. But then what he said is that the deeper you get into it, as the mind stills, it was him that introduced me to Patanjali, and Patanjali's thought of a fast mind is a sick mind, a slow mind is a healthy mind, and a still mind is divine. He said, in the moment that you eventually access that stillness, suddenly the oil can go deeper, and the message of the inspirational passage goes down into a place and starts to become part of you. And I can tell you that I've had that experience. I became a big fan of St. Francis as well, solely because of Eknath Easwaran. And how strange is it that here you have this Eastern Indian trained in these mysterious ways to the Western mind, using a Christian mystic to alter human reality. It's beautiful.
Thank you, Colin. That is beautiful as well. I appreciate that experience. I'd like to take a example from yesterday, actually, that had a profound impact on me along these same lines. For me, this notion about relationship being the kind of opportunity for practice in life seemed to me to really ring true and really be strong from what I'm reading right now and hearing. And what I have found, I was making a decision about whether I was going to do a program or not. That meant a lot to me. It was very important, but I didn't feel like I could do it alone. And I felt like suddenly I was alone, and I was about to let go of the possibility of doing that. And then, but the meditation, what has helped me do is to trust something called sort of spontaneous right action, that somehow in the moment, the right thing appears. So I had an interaction with my colleague. She said, well, I said, I want you to know, my friend, my colleague here said that I actually have this condition. It's called pathological hope. It's like that I hope beyond when things seem reasonable. And I've said, and I am guilty of this. I'm an incredible optimist. I want to see the possibility. But another colleague was there as well. And I said, I need to know. I didn't know this man well. I said, I need to know, what is your feeling about this project that we're about to take on? How do you feel about it? He said, I am so excited. I'm all in. Something to that effect. And suddenly everything shifted for me. And I realized that's what I needed to hear, that I'm not alone in this process. So for me, the relationship domain is the domain where being gets tested for me in terms of what's right or what's not, and finding that I find that most of the creative work I do, in fact, no, not most, all of it, even this process we're doing right here is a function of the relationship I have with you, Colin, and you, Maggie, and Richana. I mean, it's like the relationship is the vehicle. It's the vehicle, the thing you're pouring into, as you say in that metaphor. And for me, when that's right, things happen that need to happen and are the right things to have happen. And so I am doing a program that I care deeply about, that I would not have done had that micro moment of my colleagues saying, I'm really excited. I'm all in on this. If without that, this wouldn't have happened. And so I think, wow, just attuning to that was so important. And I think the meditation was indispensable. I know it was indispensable for my ability to attune in that way to those micro moments that matter so much.
Mm-hmm. That's beautiful, Gordon. I'm so happy you got that spark. You saw the spark, and it lit that insight within you to take that action, aligned action, right? And that's part of the magic of this group. Colin, leads these writings every single week on oneness, and powerful peace, and we can really go into all of his amazing ideas. And what Colin was mentioning earlier about the ability to go to different faiths. Easwaran doesn't shy away from that. He's like, take it from all of them. It's all pointed to the same field. So just follow a path, explore it, and I'll meet you there, because that's where the real fun is. And part of the magic, the thing you will not know, the thing we will not know until we experience it for ourselves. This is embodied or experiential wisdom. It's not a thing we can learn from a book. It's not a thing that you can understand from the mind, a cognitive understanding, a framing of an idea. And so it is so different for our brains to get our neural axon connections around it. It's as different as trying to understand how incredible it was for us to be able to send astronauts to the moon. The need to develop new technologies, new materials, new math, to have the vision, the courage to do something like that and then bring them back alive. What happened? How was that even possible? That seems to be a miracle, right? And all the discoveries that have come from that. And so equally, Easwaran says that similar to astronauts, instead of pointing it outward and externally, how about if we point it inward and internally, to do that deep dive that Colin was mentioning about pouring the oil into another vessel. And when that vessel, our mind and body complex, is primed and open to receive and go into the depths of the consciousness, the depths of the subconscious, he calls it, in his chapter on Voyagers, he calls it Atmanauts. Atmanauts. So it's the inner space program for support. We were able to arrive at discoveries where advances in science are only now beginning. So this is from, Atma, the divine self. And so that's the idea. And that when you go on this inner journey, you're going to go into depths unknown, having to discover new ways of feeling, understanding, comprehension. Wisdom that's embodied is not rational. It's totally different. So it's like leaving the atmosphere to go to the Atmanauts. So see, he's just so funny and so creative to really tell us that the different experience of time and space. So for instance, What is possible with meditation? Well, science says that if you send astronauts to the next galaxy, I forget which one it was, but they would be gone for 1,000,000 years our time, and they would come back 53 years older. That's science. That's real. That's what we're now looking to understand. It may be incomprehensible to our logic how that could happen, but if you turn that inward, what are the discoveries that are to be made with transcending what we understand as time and space to then discover what we have yet to understand in those inner reaches of our consciousness? So that's what he holds as the promise for your own exploration. So who's ready for a deep dive, my friends? I love it. Okay. Shall we What's coming up for you, Colin?
His promises were intriguing to me. Well, first I'll go back. Now, imagine I was a Kool-Aid drinking religionist at the time, and the great thing about him is, to your point, is he says, keep your tradition. This doesn't have to supersede. This doesn't have to overwhelm. Keep your tradition. Mm-hmm. The thing that he didn't say is, if you do happen to have your oil go deeper, your traditions are all going to melt away, man. Because that's exactly what happened. And they expanded. My up until that time, I had a very small box of spiritual traditions that I was willing to access. As that expansion started to occur, I began to see what he's saying. They're all the same. They're all leading to the same top of the mountain. There's different paths. But getting to the place, so he does want to meet you in that field that Rumi invited us to. He absolutely does, and it's beautiful. Mm-hmm. The thing that I didn't understand is that there is a place inside each of us that has access to that field. And in that field, the wisdom is wordless, but it does directly go to the relationships, whether with humans or money or health or whatever. It's the interaction with life that you find there. And I realize now I was just blessed. I was given a gift of grace to be able to touch the places that he's talked about, but it's still a journey. I mean, I'm 32 years plus. I found him in 1994. I'm 32 years plus, still using his methodology, still thinking about things the way he taught me to think about those things. And I'm still deepening and expanding my own experience of what you might call reality. It really is. If you think that I'd forgotten about his space analogy, but it's true, because internally there is an infinite space within us with so much wisdom, so much potential just sitting there, and most of us don't even know it's there.
Yeah. Thanks, Colin. You are right. We could just go on forever because there's so much to share in the book, so much wisdom. And what you talked about, he did repeatedly say that, honor your traditions, honor your culture. And it gets harder in a nation like ours because we have so many cultures. We have so many different ways that people understand, and they're not always accepted. So to be able to embrace our own culture, to understand the lineage of consciousness that comes with us, embedded in the mitochondria of our cells and in the cultural practices that we have, in the foods we eat, the words we say, and our practices that bring meaning into our daily life. So enrich that, honor that, and you will feel a greater connection to those threads of truth that are passed on through your unique passage of your family experience. And then he talks about personality, like personality is not a set thing. We tend to get into grooves of our thoughts that then express themselves in behavior that can be formed into more of what we see as a set personality. But that everything can be groomed into a repeat pattern. And then the idea is just to pause and be aware of, is this serving me? Is this belief an action set of patterns, something that's supporting my way of showing up with more intentional ways of living. So it's a guidebook. It's a helpful guidebook. I'm thankful for these authors that spend years, if not decades, building up this wisdom, and then to take the effort to write it down for us to discuss and reflect. And then the most important part is applying it then to our lives. Okay. Well, let's move on to the third idea, which is the era of the heart. I just get so excited when we talk about the heart. Can you tell? This final section may be the deepest emotional thread running through the entire book. As Colin was mentioning about, Gordon was talking about relationships. Like that's how he sees the nugget of the wisdom and the precious aspects of life through relationships. So Easwaran suggests that the purpose of self-mastery is not self-will or self-obsession, but loving participation in life. And that meditation and awareness ultimately expand our compassion, our patience, our ability to connect with ourselves, with others, and a vertical connection, our ability to discern, to see the judge or the other emotional clutter, and then to step into conscious relationships. So this connects us deeply to something I've been reflecting on lately, and that was my term, the era of the heart. The idea that humanity may be slowly moving from systems centered primarily around control and speed and competition and external achievement toward a more heart-centered form of consciousness, rooted in connection, coherence, discernment, emotional wisdom, and the sense of whole person flourishing. And honestly, I think those deeply human capacities may become even more important as we are stepping into this AI era. So what is flourishing to us? How can we tap into these really valuable capacities like compassion, emotional regulation, the ability to be fully present and a part of a collection, a collective group that brings greater meaning and purpose into our everyday life? So through meditation, we can learn to love not just those who are close to us, but all of life. I think this quote beautifully captures the heart of the book, right? The goal is not withdrawal from life in a personal, private practice, but to look for, to search, and to practice those different pathways for each of us to gain that deeper connection to ourselves, to those around us, and to life itself. And as we're closing our month around mental health and the mental fitness steps that we do to maintain mental health, one of the things that just keeps emerging in these conversations is the importance of compassion, connection, and emotional wisdom. So curious just to see what qualities, or maybe these new skill sets, what qualities or skill sets do you think people are most hungry for right now?
It's it's love. I mean, it's love, and I guess that's the part that every tradition, every meditation practice, some of them may not say it, but ultimately where it leads us to is the self, the Atman, that place, that point of being that is beingness, beyond words, beyond concepts, beyond ideas, beyond traditions. It's the place that connects us all. And Eknath just has, what we find is that those who have access to that touch point may use different words, may use different tools, may use different systems, but if they're touching that touch point, then they can touch your heart. And that's exactly what Eknath does. All his books. He's creative, he's funny, he's real life, he's day to day. And that was what I needed. I needed somebody to help me say, all of a sudden, my reality is not what I thought it was going to be, and it's not what normal looks like anymore. And it just helped me get a whole new perspective on things.
Yep. I agree, right? And his book, like you said, it's translating the ancient ideas and the wisdom from 6,000 years ago. Who knows how old the ancient wisdom is, from all the Bhagavad Gita and all the different darshan philosophies from yoga and related texts. But he says that they all can be translated and applied to address our modern needs, our modern challenges. So we're looking at, how can we make these practical? How can we make the knowledge and practices digestible for our modern lifestyles and different cultural perspectives, right? Honoring the traditions, honoring the belief systems that we bring. How can we bring our focus to growing this attention, regaining attention in this AI world? That this is really the training ground for our freedom. Freedom from disease of the mind, freedom from the emotional imbalance, freedom from being dysregulated through stress and chronic distractions, and putting ourselves back into the driver's seat, as we've been talking about through many of the books this month. So as attention shapes experiences, how do we step in and become the active co-creators of the experiences in our everyday lives that are beginning to shape our lifestyles and our health? And daily life as practice, right? Like meditation as a warm-up exercise before the day gets going, so we're not spraining our mind throughout the day. I just love that. How inviting throughout the day to create exercise stations for the mind, where we pause and dive in and reset and then tune back in to what matters right now. How can we show up as our best in the next hour, in the next day, in what matters? And the idea around flourishing, flourishing begins within, about the heart, empathy for self and others, and how we're aiming to be in that same space, that same gap, where we're all human, we're all facing challenges and pain, right? And we're showing up with courage and the sort of inquiry or curiosity of how we can show up with more intention on how we're creating our life. In this group, we'd love to apply the information and integrate it into our day-to-day activities, right? So we encourage reading deeply, sharing generously, or reflecting together with other people, just like we are here, and then to pull out those practices and then begin to put them into your days. Practice intentionally, because wisdom becomes transformational when it moves into practice. So the final questions are, what ideas stood out to you the most in this book? What is one small action you feel inspired to begin? Maybe a practice that he talked about or shared in the book, or that somebody shared in the discussion. Or what is one small habit or reaction or distraction you might want to replace or interrupt? So we call those the +1 or the -1 from our heroic community. So Colin, I'd love to come back with you one more time.
This book functions a lot like As a Man Thinketh by James Allen. It tells you, it gives you theory, it gives you possibility, it gives you ideas of the potential, the conquest of mind. What you find once you get into it is that it's not overcoming something like grabbing it and tying it down or something. It's the work from within is letting a part of us emerge that's already there. And he points to it. He says it's already here, but your own mind is going so fast and so out of control that you don't even know it. And that idea intrigued me. It intrigued me, and it's not easy. I can tell you, making the effort to. He says, well, okay, two things real quick. Sorry. One, he said, you don't have to get into all kind of yoga poses, and you don't have to do all kind of breathing exercises. He says, what you need to do is just sit in a chair, keep your back straight, feet on the ground, close your eyes. That's good enough. All right. So that took 90% of the hesitation of, meditation trauma out. But then I think the part that really, really got me is the fact that he always pulls it back to real life. You're in traffic and you're impatient, or one of your kids or your spouse is doing something and you're irritated. He says every one of those things is a direct result of a mind that's running too fast. And it's true. It's true. The only time I've ever moved into those stages is when I've let my mind move too quickly. And I think that's the one thing that I'd say, if there's one idea that stands out, is taking the time to train your mind to just slow down. And all this beautiful, beautiful stuff just starts to rise from within. And that's what Eknath Easwaran did for me.
I can feel that. I can feel the sort of relief, the find, the discovery, and what he was sharing about freedom. These are practices that free us from the constraints that sort of keep us from diving deep into sort of the essence of who we are. He even talks about that some of these modern distractions, especially more as we go into AI, they can be like a lifesaver around our waist that prevents us from being able to go under, just because it just keeps us at this superficial kind of, human router type of operation. We're just living at a very quick and reactive manner that we have no idea what it's like to take that, raft off and allow ourselves to be submerged and to feel that inner quiet, the stillness. If you've ever done that, as a kid, if you've ever gone to the bottom of a pool and like taken a rock or something and you hold on to it and close your eyes, and you can even close your ears and close your nose, and you have no senses anymore. And so it's just this beautiful floating sensation. And so that lightness of being with no distractions and just pure presence is a portal to deeper levels of understanding. And I love how he makes it very practical, like Colin was saying, and the promise of the practice. So we train, it's like training. We're training on the cushion, not for the experience solely of what we have on the meditation cushion, but like he said, it's a warm-up exercise for the day to plug in, to remember who we are beyond the roles, the titles, the personality, what we look like, all of those external ways of defining who we are, and to remember our essence. And when we start the day plugged in, when we start the day truly seeing ourself and life, it colors the world around us in such a different way. And the more we do it, it's been likened to the practice of dyeing a cloth. So the first time you dye that white piece of cloth in a beautiful red, vibrant dye, water with red, you bring the cloth out and it looks just slightly pink, right? And that might be, you might get a little benefit with a practice here or there, but the real benefits come with consistency, the daily practice, whether it's 1 minute every day, or you've got a full-on dedicated practice of 20 minutes, an hour, twice a day. Everybody's different. There's no perfect way. But the idea is every time you dip that cloth into the colored, dyed water of consciousness, it comes out a little deeper in that color. So we can literally transform the color of our consciousness, the lens through which we see ourselves and life. And life becomes a joy. Life becomes a play, a stage where we can see ourselves as actors in stages of our life. And it becomes so much more enriching and allows us more clear ways to step in and be active participants in directing where our lives are going. So for all of this and more, we do encourage you to treat yourself and buy the book, or go to the library and check out any of the books by Eknath Easwaran. We'll have a QR code to share a brief summary of the book for those that are in our private WhatsApp chat group, or if you'd love to join our conversations live for our upcoming sessions, we'll go ahead and share that QR code shortly. But as we begin to wrap up, we really want to thank you, Colin and Gordon, joining us earlier, and for everyone's contributions this month in Cafecito Chat. I've honestly been so grateful and enriched from these conversations. And this way, this month's book have been woven together was just really magical and powerful. We looked at, attention and mental fitness and how it all impacts our nervous system, our ability to be aware and consciously living our days. But thank you again. This was just a really meaningful month, a very powerful month.
I agree. I swear these four recordings carry so much. Oh my God, Maggie, so much. So
yeah, absolutely. So next month we shift a new focus on a theme of joy, vitality, and living fully. So to honor, as we're changing the season, we're starting June and we're starting summer fun. We're going to shift our books around to look at more movement and energy and flow and community and different ways to kind of approach experiencing well-being and flourishing. So for next week, join us for a closer look and big ideas around our book, Eat, Move, Sleep by Tom Rath. You might know him from the author of Strength Finders 2.0. So my friends, thank you so much for joining in. It's been an absolute pleasure to be here with you to discuss this book today. And so from here in Pause and Pivot, we want to say thank you for joining us. Until next time, and take a moment to pause, not to stop, but to pivot toward what matters. Thanks so much for joining, and we'll see you next time.